Millionaire comes home early, freezes when he sees what the stepmother did to his daughter. In the elegant suburbs of Boston, from the outside, everything seemed flawless. Lawns trimmed to perfection, maple trees glowing under the afternoon sun, and the Whitmore mansion shining like a symbol of success. After the sudden death of his wife, Charles Whitmore fell into an emptiness no words could describe. An architect and prominent real estate developer in Boston, he was accustomed to grand decisions, to raising skyscrapers and designing modern neighborhoods. And yet, when faced with the sorrowful eyes of his little girl, he found himself clumsy and helpless, unable to mend the loss. Charles believed that what Lily needed most was the figure of a mother. He told himself that if someone gentle could step into their empty home, someone who knew how to care, how to fill that hollow space, then his daughter might find comfort. It was then that Vivian Carter appeared. Vivian, with her refined elegance, flawless smile, and soft-spoken charm in public, drew admiration wherever she went. She was present at charity events, at art galas in downtown Boston, always radiant as though she had been born to stand beneath the lights. Beside Charles, Vivian seemed like the perfect match. He, the accomplished man of business, and she, the woman who knew how to shine in high society. Friends and colleagues congratulated him. "You've found happiness again," they said. To the outside world, the Whitmores were the picture of an ideal family, a successful businessman, an elegant wife, and a beloved little girl growing up in luxury. But few noticed that behind that graceful smile, Vivian carried another look, one that appeared only when no one else was watching, a look as cold as a blade. Lily, with the instinctive sensitivity of a child, sensed it from the beginning. Even when Vivian embraced her in front of others, even when sweet words filled the air in the presence of guests, Lily felt no warmth in that embrace, no protection in those eyes. Within the wide house, its white walls and tall windows gleaming, Lily's laughter grew rarer with each passing day. In its place came long silences, cautious stillness whenever Vivian entered the room. Charles, buried in his work, believed he had done the right thing. He never realized that his daughter's grief had never been soothed. He did not know that the 8-year-old girl had learned, day by day, to hide the tremor in her eyes so her father would not worry further. To the world, this was a model family. But in Lily's heart, the house had become a place where loneliness clung to every breath she took. It was a gentle spring evening, just as the tulips in the Whitmore garden had burst into bloom. In the spacious dining room, a crystal chandelier cast a warm glow, its light shimmering across the polished wooden table. On the table, freshly baked sourdough bread released its inviting aroma, a bottle of red wine stood uncorked, and fine white porcelain plates were neatly arranged as if for a formal banquet. Charles sat at the head of the table, pouring wine while speaking animatedly about his upcoming project in Chicago. His voice rang with excitement, as though it marked another milestone in his career. He explained that the trip would last at least a week, since he needed to personally oversee the final stages of a riverside development. Beside him, Lily played with her silver fork, tapping it gently against the rim of her plate to mask her unease. Every time the words "a week" echoed in her mind, it felt like a sentence being handed down. A week in this house under Vivian's cold gaze. Across from Charles sat Vivian, dressed in an ivory-fitted dress. Her face radiated elegance, her eyes softening briefly when they met her husband's. But the moment they flickered toward Lily, an icy chill replaced the warmth. Her fingers traced the stem of her wineglass, a casual habit to most, but to Lily it was a silent warning. Next to her, Ethan, Vivian's son, eagerly showed off the new drone his mother had bought him that morning. He spoke nonstop, clutching the remote control as if the entire world revolved around his game. Charles smiled and nodded, feigning interest, while Lily lowered her head in silence. Cutlery chimed as Charles spoke, and the room pretended to be cheerful. Beneath it, Lily sat like a fading outline, hiding the fear cinching her chest. Outside, the sounds of the neighborhood drifted in, laughter, music, the signs of an approaching spring festival. But within the golden-lit room, the atmosphere was nothing more than a fragile mask of peace. When the clock struck 10, Charles set his fork down on the plate and firmly announced that he would be leaving the next morning. He explained that his assistant had arranged everything, and a car would take him early to the station to catch the express train. Vivian smiled with satisfaction, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Darling, don't worry. Everything at home will be under control." Lily, however, felt a knot tighten in her chest. The piece of bread on her plate became impossible to swallow, and she looked at her father with silent, pleading eyes. Her tiny fingers played nervously with the edge of the tablecloth, as if searching for an invisible refuge. No one noticed the quiet tears slipping down her cheeks. Perhaps Ethan did, but he kept chewing without saying a word. Believing everything had been settled, Charles raised his glass of wine in a toast. Vivian mirrored him, flawless in every gesture. Lily lifted her glass of milk, struggling to keep her fingers from trembling. Outside, the glow of passing headlights flickered through the shutters, and the cool spring air slipped in, carrying faint sap and rain, the scent of a city shaking off winter. "Daddy, when will you come back?" Lily whispered, but her voice was lost amid the clinking glasses and the silence at the dinner table. The moment the door closed behind Charles, the atmosphere inside the house shifted instantly. The false gentleness vanished from Vivian. She dropped heavily onto the sofa, switched on the television, and ordered Lily to clear the table without so much as a glance in her direction. The little girl obeyed quietly, gathering each plate while the sound of laughter from a TV show echoed through the room. Lily tried to be careful, but her small arms could barely handle the heavy stack of dishes. On her way to the kitchen, Ethan brushed past with a drone in his hand, making no effort to help. Vivian's cold voice cut through the air. "If you want dinner, you'd better wash all those glasses first." Swallowing hard, Lily nodded. Her stomach growled with hunger, yet she turned on the faucet, letting the water run as white soap suds foamed up. Her little hands, submerged in the froth, grew red and numb. Each time a glass slipped slightly in her grip, her heart nearly burst out of her chest for fear Vivian would hear it shatter. Meanwhile, Vivian flipped through a fashion magazine, and Ethan happily munched on a plate of cookies. The contrast was cruel. He ate with ease, while Lily could hardly stand on her feet. From time to time, Vivian barked out another sharp command. "Hurry up, Lily. You still have to sweep the floor after that." Tears streamed down Lily's cheeks as she fought to keep the fragile dishes from slipping. At an age when other children were free to play or study, she was bound by exhausting chores and the harsh demands of a woman who had never shown her the slightest affection. Under the hard kitchen light, the sink steamed as hot water ran and ran. Lily balanced on a wooden stool, reaching for a tower of greasy dishes. The heat reddened her cheeks, and the soap had already roughened her tiny hands. Vivian sat cross-legged on the sofa, a fashion magazine spread open before her. Every so often she glanced up, letting a sharp, cutting remark fall like a blade. "Scrub that glass properly, Lily. I don't want to see a single spot." In the living room, Ethan munched on cookies his mother had bought, crumbs scattering across the carpet. He giggled as his drone spun in loops overhead, the whir of its blades buzzing like mockery. Lily, in contrast, had no strength left for laughter. Each time a glass slipped slightly in her hands, her heart pounded, terrified that the crash of breaking glass would trigger Vivian's rage. She clenched her small fingers tight, fighting to steady their trembling. When the dishes were finally done, she looked up, hoping for rest, but Vivian's voice sliced through again. "Mop the kitchen floor, then arrange the chairs neatly. Do it quickly." Ethan watched the scene from the corner of his eye. He said nothing, but for the first time, he looked unsettled. He saw Lily scrubbing a glass so hard that her knuckles turned white. For a brief moment, Ethan thought about offering her a cookie, but his mother's sharp gaze silenced him. Even he was a prisoner, trapped in blind obedience to Vivian. Lily nodded, offering no resistance. Silence was her only shield. Through the kitchen window, the glow of the street lights revealed families returning from the spring fair, their hands clutching colorful balloons and bags of warm churros. Lily watched them with longing, wishing she could walk beside her father, tasting donuts at the bustling festival in downtown Boston. The contrast made her heart ache as sharply as her weary arms. Time passed, and the house grew spotless, as if a grown housemaid had been working for hours. Vivian, satisfied, switched off the television and led her son off to bed. Lily, by contrast, was given nothing more than a piece of dry bread and a glass of cold water for dinner. She accepted it quietly, her eyes fixed on the floor. As she slowly chewed the hard crust, her father's words echoed in her mind. "I trust Vivian. She will take care of you." Her chest tightened with pain at the thought that he might never know the truth. In the dimly lit kitchen, with the sink still damp and the faint scent of soap lingering in the air, the little girl closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek, mixing with the salty taste of bread in her mouth. From the opposite window, Mrs. Thompson, the neighbor, watched with a worried expression. She had seen too many times how the child was worked to exhaustion. In her heart rose the same question. How long would it take before the father finally opened his eyes? As the days passed, Lily's laughter faded like a candle flickering out in a windless night. Each morning she woke before the household clock struck, her body weary, her hands still rough from soap. While other children her age hurried off to school with colorful backpacks, Lily remained trapped in the endless chores Vivian imposed with absolute coldness. The dining room, once filled with family stories, had become a battlefield. Vivian served Ethan a lavish breakfast, warm milk, buttered toast with jam, and a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. Lily, in contrast, was given only a dry slice of bread, sometimes just a plain glass of water. She bowed her head, never daring to ask for more. The injustice was so stark that even Ethan, his mouth still full of bread, glanced sideways at Lily with unease, fidgeting in his chair. One gloomy morning, heavy clouds signaling rain, Vivian ordered Lily to scrub the kitchen floor. While Ethan devoured churros dipped in hot chocolate his mother had just bought from the nearby bakery, Lily knelt down, scrubbing the tiles. The contrast was merciless. The sweet aroma of chocolate filled the room, but for Lily, there was only the biting chill of the cold floor against her skin. Mrs. Thompson, the neighbor next door, often caught sight of Lily through the wide window facing the garden. Time and again, she saw the little girl bent over sweeping, her frail shoulders trembling in the early morning light. The woman's brow furrowed, her heart heavy. Having lost her husband years ago, she knew well what it meant for a child to live without a steady hand of protection. Why doesn't Mr. Whitmore see? She wondered silently. One rainy afternoon, a knock sounded at the door. It was Mrs. Jenkins, the family's former housekeeper, arriving with her gentle smile. She had cared for Lily since infancy, and in her heart she still regarded the child as her own granddaughter. "Hello, Vivian. I just came to return the old set of keys," she said softly. But as soon as she stepped into the kitchen, the scene froze her in place. Lily was kneeling, her small hands gripping a rag as she scrubbed the floor with force, her hair plastered to her cheeks with sweat and tears. "Lily, child, what are you doing?" Her voice trembled. Vivian quickly intervened, a strained smile stretching across her lips. "I'm only teaching her discipline, Jenkins. Nothing to worry about." But Mrs. Jenkins's eyes darkened. She had worked in this house for years. She knew the difference between discipline and cruelty. Before she could say more, Vivian raised a hand in dismissal, polite but unyielding. Thank you for stopping by, but we're very busy now." Mrs. Jenkins walked away slowly, her eyes lingering on Lily until the door closed firmly behind her. In her chest, a worry grew heavy. She knew that the truth inside this house was not discipline at all, but something far more merciless. Evening fell over Boston's suburbs beneath a gray sky. From the street came the beat of drums and the strum of guitars, young people rehearsing for the spring festival. The joy outside seemed to belong to another world, separated by the walls of a house that had become a prison for a child. In the living room, Vivian casually flipped through a fashion magazine. Ethan played with his drone, though his eyes kept drifting toward Lily. He wanted to say something, but the words caught in his throat. He had grown too accustomed to obeying his mother without question. Breaking that habit was harder than he imagined. Meanwhile, Lily worked in silence, wiping the windows, straightening chairs, picking crumbs off the floor. With every task, her presence seemed to fade further, as if she were becoming invisible in the adult world around her. The only thing that kept her spirit alive were the memories of walking with her father on summer afternoons, sharing ice cream and listening to his stories about the old statues in the city. May arrived, and the city of Boston dressed itself in festival colors. In the square by the harbor, flags and lanterns of every shade lined the streets. The sound of jazz bands echoed, blending with drums and the bright laughter of children racing with balloons in hand. The air carried the scents of roasted corn, caramel apples, and spun sugar drifting on the spring breeze, thickening the joy. Families passed by the Whitmore mansion, their arms full of shopping bags, light jackets fluttering, their voices rising in cheerful chatter. Children Lily's age clung tightly to their parents' hands, their faces lit with anticipation for the fireworks that would paint the night sky. But inside that glittering house, an entirely different picture unfolded. Lily crouched low, scrubbing dust from the window frames, her small hands already cracked from the chemicals. Each time she looked up, through the pane of glass, she saw the cheerful crowds passing by, and her heart twisted painfully. Vivian reclined on the sofa, flipping through glossy magazine pages as though the joy outside bore no connection to her. Ethan sat on the rug, still absorbed in his drone, though his eyes occasionally darted toward Lily, a flicker of unease in their depths. Within those walls, the laughter outside seemed foreign, unreachable. In its place lay a stifling silence, broken only by the rag scraping against glass and the labored breath of an 8-year-old child. The world beyond was celebrating. But inside the Whitmore mansion, Lily lived as a small prisoner, waiting only for the day her father would return. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Charles was wrapping up a meeting with a group of architects at a hotel near the riverfront. Suddenly, a strange feeling swept over him like a warning. The image of his daughter flashed in his mind, the sadness in her eyes at their last dinner together. A man accustomed to numbers and contracts now felt an ache in his chest he could not explain. He rose in the middle of the meeting and made an unexpected decision: to shorten the trip and return to Boston earlier than planned. He needed to see Lily again. He needed to be sure his daughter was all right. He had no idea that at that very moment Lily was weeping in silence. Her small hands, cracked from soap and water, clung to the fragile hope that she had not been forgotten. Outside, Boston burst with music and blossoms for the spring festival. But inside the Whitmore home, silence reigned with cruel force. The sounds of brass bands, drums, and laughter from the celebrations drifted through the window. But indoors the air was so heavy it could be cut with a knife. Lily stood at the sink, her thin arms straining to reach the tower of dishes. Vivian sat on a high-backed chair, watching her with a severe gaze. "Hurry up, Lily. We don't have all night," she ordered harshly. The little girl was so exhausted she could barely keep her balance while holding the slippery plates. Water trickled down, soap seeping into the cracks on her skin, stinging sharply. Her stomach growled with hunger, but she knew any complaint would only mean harsher punishment. Dinner would be nothing more than dry bread, or perhaps nothing at all. At the table, Ethan sat with a bowl of fresh fruit his mother had placed before him. He peeled an orange, glancing at his stepsister with conflicted eyes. He wasn't the one to blame, yet his silence made him complicit. Each bite of orange grew bitter on his tongue, but still he didn't dare speak. Outside, fireworks for the festival lit up the Boston sky. Their colors spilled through the curtains, painting the dining room in streaks of red and green. Annoyed by the noise, Vivian slammed the window shut, then unleashed her frustration on Lily. "If you want supper, you'll wash every last dish, not a single glass left dirty." Tears blurred Lily's vision. Her body trembled, so weary that one glass nearly slipped from her hand. Holding her breath, she set it down on the counter. No praise followed, only another sharp command from Vivian. And the floor, too. At that very instant, the sound of a key turning in the front door lock echoed through the house. Vivian's face paled. Clearly, she had not expected anyone. Lily's heart pounded as she snapped her head up. The atmosphere thickened like stone. Charles stepped inside with a stern expression, still carrying the leather briefcase from his meeting. Compelled by an unshakable instinct, he had caught the express train from Chicago back to Boston without warning. The moment he entered the living room, the scene before him froze him in place. Vivian was shouting, Lily's small hands were raw from dishwater, and Ethan sat silently as a mute witness. Charles set his briefcase down on the floor, his eyes locked on his daughter. Vivian forced a nervous smile, but her expression quickly crumbled under the weight of his glare. "Charles, I didn't expect you home so soon," she stammered, her voice trembling. But he wasn't listening. Charles's eyes locked on Lily, on her young face etched with exhaustion, on her hands raw and red from scrubbing dishes. His heart clenched as though crushed in a vice. "Enough, Vivian!" he thundered, his voice echoing through the house. The air froze. Vivian stood stunned, while Ethan dropped his orange slice onto the floor. Lily, startled, let the rag slip from her hand and looked up at her father with tear-filled eyes, caught between fear and hope. Outside, the songs of the spring festival still echoed, but inside the house, a silent storm was breaking loose. Charles strode directly toward his daughter. Lily trembled, her small hands reddened from hot water and soap. Vivian tried to regain composure, adjusting her dress and forcing a brittle smile. "Charles, it's not what you think. She needs structure, chores, routine. It's the only way she'll learn." Charles glared at her. "Discipline? She's only 8 years old. Forcing her to scrub dishes until her hands are cracked, leaving her hungry? Do you call that discipline?" His voice, once calm in boardrooms, now shook with fury. Vivian stepped forward, but Charles raised a hand to stop her. "Not another word!" The roar carried through the house, louder than the fireworks exploding outside. He knelt down, gently taking Lily's tiny hands. The sight tore him apart, her small fingers raw and bleeding. For the first time in all his years of business triumphs, tears welled in Charles's eyes. "My little girl," he whispered, unable to say more. Lily looked up at him, her eyes blurred with tears, and from her trembling lips came words that shattered every heart in the room. "Daddy, you won't leave me here alone again, will you?" Time seemed to stop. Ethan lowered his head, nails digging into his palm, as if pain could steady his shaking. Shame pooled in his throat until the words finally broke free. Vivian rushed forward, desperate. "Charles, you can't let a child manipulate you like this. Everything I've done has been for this family." But Charles no longer listened. In that moment he realized his greatest mistake was not marrying Vivian, but entrusting his daughter to a woman who had never known how to love. His voice thundered, each word like a hammer striking stone. "My daughter must be raised with love, not with humiliation." Vivian faltered. The mask cracked, revealing a face twisted with fear and rage. Then, unexpectedly, Ethan spoke, hesitant yet resolute. "Mom, Lily isn't lying. I saw everything." Vivian froze, unable to believe her own son had turned against her. Charles drew in a long, steady breath and made his final, irrevocable decision. "From this day forward, this house has no place for you, Vivian. You have lost the right to be called a mother in front of my daughter." He pointed firmly to the door. The room sank into suffocating silence. Vivian bit her lip, her eyes burning with humiliation and fury. She grabbed Ethan's arm to drag him away, but he pulled back, tears welling up. "I don't want to go with you, Mom." Her own son's refusal struck like a mortal blow. Staggering, Vivian stepped outside. As the door closed behind Vivian, Charles sank to his knees, wrapping his arms tightly around Lily. The little girl buried her face in his chest, her whole body trembling like a bird just freed from its cage. Charles held her close, his shoulders shaking, muffled sobs breaking through years of carefully guarded restraint. "My daughter, from now on, I will never let you face this alone again." His voice was hoarse, yet steady as a vow. Lily sobbed, then gradually relaxed. In that embrace, she felt a safety she had nearly forgotten. The familiar scent of her father's suit, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her ear, all told her she was finally protected. Charles lifted her gently, carrying her into the kitchen. He set her down on a chair, then opened the refrigerator, fumbling with whatever ingredients were there. Hands once accustomed to signing contracts and sketching blueprints now looked clumsy peeling potatoes and cracking eggs. Yet he pressed on, patient and determined. Lily watched, her eyes still swollen from tears, but the corners of her lips curved into the faintest smile, the first in many days. She could hardly believe her busy father was at the stove, cooking scrambled eggs and toast just for her. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Charles set the knife down and went to answer. On the doorstep stood Mrs. Jenkins, holding a box of freshly baked cookies wrapped neatly in brown paper. "I heard some troubling things tonight, so I had to come. I brought some cookies for Lily." Her gentle voice carried warmth. As she stepped inside, she opened her arms wide and embraced Lily. The child nestled into her shoulder as if reunited with kin. Tears fell again, but this time they came with the relief of knowing she was no longer alone. Nearby, Ethan stood quietly, then approached. He lowered his head, his voice choked. "Lily? I'm sorry. I stayed silent for too long. You were right." Lily looked at him, hesitated a moment, then nodded softly. She spoke no words, but her gaze gave the answer. She accepted his apology. In the kitchen, now filled with the scent of scrambled eggs and warm cookies, something had changed. No more coldness, no more harsh commands. Only quiet breaths, the gentle clink of utensils, and warmth seeping into every corner of the house. At the modest dinner table that evening, there were no glasses of wine or elaborate dishes. Only a plate of golden scrambled eggs, a few slices of crisp toast, and a box of butter-scented cookies Mrs. Jenkins had brought. But in Lily's eyes, it was the most wonderful meal she had ever known. Charles sat beside his daughter, carefully serving her small portions. Every clumsy movement drew a soft giggle from Lily. Ethan sat nearby, quieter than usual, yet his eyes drifted toward Lily now and then, as if to make sure she had truly forgiven him. Outside the window, fireworks from the festival erupted, streaks of red, blue, and gold, painting Boston's night sky. Their glow spilled into the dining room, bathing the three faces gathered at the table in warm golden light. Lily rested her head on her father's shoulder. A faint laugh slipped from her lips, the first laughter to echo in this house after long months of gloom. Charles wrapped his arm around her, feeling both her fragility and her warmth. Mrs. Jenkins watched with a contented smile. To her, this was true wealth, not contracts or grand mansions, but the moment a family found its way back to one another. That night, for the first time, the Whitmore house truly became a home. A few weeks after that fateful night, Charles sat in the courtroom of Boston's courthouse, where white light poured down on rows of cold wooden benches. Across from him, Vivian appeared in a dark dress, her face still carrying pride, yet her eyes betrayed unease she could no longer conceal. The lawyer read the proceedings clearly. The divorce between Charles Whitmore and Vivian Carter would be finalized that very day. Charles remained calm, his gaze unwavering. He knew this was not only the end of a misguided marriage, but the only way to protect Lily and restore peace to their home. The judge turned toward Ethan, the boy sitting silently between the two adults. His voice rang steady, yet gentle. "Ethan, who do you wish to live with?" The room fell silent. Ethan clenched his small fists, his eyes brimming with tears. He glanced at Vivian, the mother he had once trusted, then slowly turned toward Charles and Lily, where the little girl watched him with trembling hope. "I want to live with Lily." "And with Mr. Charles," Ethan said, his voice shaking but resolute. "That's where I feel like it's a real family." Vivian froze, her face draining of color, her lips quivering but unable to form words. The courtroom held its breath until the sound of the judge's pen scratching across paper sealed the end of a dark chapter. Leaving the courthouse, Charles held both children's hands, one on each side. He bent down, his voice husky but warm. "You don't need to worry anymore. From now on, I'll be here for both of you. I love Lily, and I love Ethan, as if you were both my own." Lily looked up at her father, her eyes glowing like the morning sun. Ethan, after a moment of hesitation, wrapped his arms tightly around Charles. For the first time, he felt the warmth of a true father, a love he had never known. Back at the Whitmore home, the atmosphere was transformed. No more harsh commands, no more chill in the air. Instead, laughter echoed through the rooms, the smell of cookies from Mrs. Jenkins lingered, and simple dinners became moments of joy shared together. Under the fireworks bursting over Boston that night, Charles sat between the two children, his arms embracing both Lily and Ethan. He knew that though the past had left its scars, from this moment forward, their family would begin a new chapter, one of love, forgiveness, and the true meaning of home. The story leaves us with a clear lesson. Discipline without love is nothing more than cruelty dressed in fine clothes. A child does not need cold severity, but unconditional love to truly grow. For Charles, his greatest mistake was not marrying the wrong woman, but failing to hear the silent cries of his own daughter. He realized that love cannot be delegated to anyone else. It must come from the heart of a parent. In life, we often chase after success, wealth, and prestige. But there comes a day when we understand the only thing that remains is family, the embraces and smiles that ask for nothing in return. So I want to ask you, the one listening to this story, could there be someone in your family waiting for a hug, a word of care that you may have overlooked? Because sometimes a single small gesture is enough to change an entire life. Tonight, as the fireworks fade, remember this: a true home is not built of stone and mortar, but of love, forgiveness, and compassion. That is the only wealth that lasts, the legacy we can leave for those we love.